to me, it came out onto the page, and I normally sit every morning, and then I just go to the writing pad and just write, and I just write, just sort of. I start somewhere, and uh, where the pen up, where the pen's up, no one can tell. That's the way I like to write. Rumi said, "Do you think I know what I'm doing, where I'm going? No more than the pen knows what it's going to write, nor the ball knows where it's going to be kicked." And so I sort of write that way. This poem came out almost word for word. It's a poem I changed maybe one or two words just to get it to the ear. But so this was a surprise, totally a gift. It's called The Green Man. Uh, I remember writing it shortly after my father died, and ending a period of 7 years of taking care of mom and dad. They both had dementia at the same time, and we built the reason Loose Leaf Hollow exists. The reason I'm talking to you from the retreat house is because we built another house onto this house, uh, uh, and so we could take my mother and father and take care of them. It seemed like a gargantuan error, by the way. About a year into it, it went on for 7 years, but this came shortly after that, and this is actually one of those kind of my ruin is my fortune kind of poems, because it came out of the grace of that period. The Green Man. The Green Man built a treehouse in the center of my heart. No one asked him to. He just showed up one day. He never asked me. He never called to inquire about available space. The Green Man just appeared one day, swinging and laughing in a glowing tree of emeralds in the heart of my chest. I forget all about him. And then when pain and suffering arises, I can hear him laughing and swinging from the branches. And somehow that changes everything. More and more, I open my heart to the pain and suffering of the moment and just breathe it all in. On the out breath, a green luminosity vibrates out into the world from every cell of my body. The green of a newly unfurled leaf on the first day of spring. More and more, I open my heart to the pain and suffering of the moment and just breathe it all in and breathe out a green luminosity that vibrates into the world out of each and every cell of my body. The green of a newly unfurled leaf on the first day of spring. The Green Man built a treehouse in the center of my heart. No one asked him to. He just showed up one day. He never asked me. He never called to inquire about available space. The Green Man just appeared one day, swinging and laughing in a glowing tree of emeralds in the center of my chest. Yeah. And read that poem out loud for a while. This is my prayer cloth that a good friend made for me, and I gave to Sister Elaine, my Dominican friend who passed away at 90 from COVID 5 years ago. We sort of we had a real bond, and she came for make a retreat, and I gave this one to her. I have another one as well, a blue, sort of dark blue one, but I gave this to her, and she loved it so much. I said, "Well, you take that. You take that. I've got two." And so she kept it for 5 years. She sewed a little thing on the inside of it. This quilt should go to Sainsbury with me. That was a place where the older nuns went, In the event of my death, it's to go back to Joe's Rontonella. She got my address in there, and it came back to me. And it was quite a moving thing to go over to the house and get this. Plus, she gave me a huge painting of her jewel tree. If you guys know about the Tibetan jewel tree practice, someday we may talk about it. But this became my sort of spiritual colors after the green man showed up, and the gold and green they come together. A very interesting story. But anyway, I think what I'd like to talk about a little bit in the time we have left is, I wanted to say something about Earth Day. I wanted to say something about the Earth. When Earth Day comes up, I always feel like, oh well, we need to talk about it. I think we'll never save anything we don't love, and this is about the love of the earth. And the Green Man here, and I never knew it when I wrote the poem, but then later, one of my sisters on the walk, she said, there really is a green man. And, showed me the medieval green man that showed up. And actually, I found out later that there was an actual green man that shows up in Rumi's poem. He's called Hitter. He's called the guide of souls, but he comes out of the foliage, comes out of the foliage. And, we have that in Shakespeare, Puck, those spirits of the wood. And, I grew up surrounded by the woods. I lived probably about a mile from where my former roommate, Nick, lived, former roommate before Pam took over the job. He lived about a mile away. We never knew each other until we got thrown in the same room at Notre Dame. He lived a mile away from me. Went to the public school. I went to the Catholic school. Quite an interesting thing. But he knows where I lived. It was in an area filled with dense woods, just on the edge. It was an unincorporated area. And early on, I would, as a young kid, I was lucky. I was born into a house that was not only safe and secure economically, but I had a grandmother who was a mystic. I didn't know it at the time, but she was. There's four worldviews. There's like four sets of glasses that we all look through. Your worldview is not what the world is like out there. It's the view through which, the glasses through which you see the world. And sometimes you can have on more than one set of glasses. And I was born with the benefit of just where I was born. I was born into a kind of incarnate mystical world because of my grandmother. And because, I never wanted for anything. And I had my mother and my other two older sisters. And so they were all taking care of me. It was like a really warm, great place to be born. That has a lot to do with the start for me, you see. And so there's the incarnate world where we'll double back to that. What are the four sets of glasses that we could put on? And during a lifetime, we might have one or two or even three sets of glasses on at the same time. That's why things can get a little confusing. But our culture's worldview is probably the materialist worldview. You look out and it's all a stuff, just matter, no spirit, no deeper meaning. It's a kind of I-it relationship, I-it worldview. Everything is an it for me to manipulate, to make money off, to buy and sell. Things aren't alive. This is not the worldview of the indigenous people, the first peoples when the pilgrims moved in at all. They had more of an incarnate worldview where everything was alive with the sound of music, as Maria says in the movie. The hills. Yeah. So I got to see that movie tonight, because she had an incarnational worldview. They moved her in to work with this Austrian, soldier who was like discipline, discipline, discipline. Well, I was, even though my temperament is a discipline, discipline, discipline kind of guy, I was born as a one. I was born into an incarnate worldview. And so I remember, so anyway, matter. And then another set of glasses is it's all spirit, spiritual view. and everything and all this stuff is just BS. And I can't wait to get the shuttle. Can't wait for the uh, time when we all go off on the shuttle to heaven and leave all this crap behind. And so that's sort of just a purely spiritual worldview, that this is all a veil of tears here, and sooner we get out of this shit, the better. So there's the spiritual worldview, and then there's the priestly worldview, which is the third one. In the priestly worldview, with most organized religion, there's somebody, a priest, minister, whatever, and it's his job to bring the two together, to be a link. Okay, most organized religions have some form of that. Walt Whitman, in Leaves of Grass, one great line, he says, the time of the priest is over. It's time for everybody to be their own priest. Well, he was on the cutting edge. He was also the fourth type, which is an incarnational type. An incarnation means you realize that the matter and spirit have never been pulled apart. They've never been separated. You can only in your mind can you separate them. And in our culture, everything it's just to make cash, to make money from. So, cut down all the trees to put up a parking lot, as Joni Mitchell said. She's an incarnational mystic. And so I was this little incarnational mystic until I went to school and was taught that, everything wasn't like that. But, and I used to go out behind my house and just sit in the woods, because I didn't have anybody my age. My next sister, Camille, was 6 years older. So I used to go out there when I was a little guy and just sit in what I called the green place. And I'd sit for hours out there in the woods. And it just occurred to me the last week or so that here I am in the green place here, surrounded by 18,000 acres of trees. And I realized along the way that these trees have changed me. This green stuff has changed me in ways that I could have never noticed, never even done in it. And when people come here to Loose Leaf Hollow, that was a picture of the entrance to the hollow, big weeping cherry tree there. When people come here and have an experience, they might think I'm the one here, and I sort of live with that thing for a while, like, yeah, I'm doing all this, but really the trees, to come and sit there. One woman who's pretty stressed out, and works as hard as any woman I know alive, she comes here and she gets in the hammock underneath the maple tree. That's what does it for her. She puts up with me and the oatmeal too, but she spends a lot of time just out in the hammock under the tree in the green world. That's an incarnational people see everything as sacred. So I doubt if we're going to save the planet until we love the planet. And I doubt if we're going to love the planet enough to save it until we see that it's all sacred. If we saw that it was all sacred, we couldn't do what we're doing. We wouldn't cut down the trees to put up a parking lot. We would, we just couldn't live the way we're living. So this is, I think, the deepest way to save the planet is to start realizing that we have a deeper, we have four worldviews, but there's four things we long to connect to. I think we long to connect with our deepest self. We long to connect with our brothers and sisters. We long to connect with nature, and we long to connect with the transcendent, which is what we're going to do in a few minutes when we drop down, just to connect with the transcendent divine source of all of this, but not to devalue the other three. I think if Jesus was talking now, Jesus spent his whole life in nature, very, very little time indoors. You see, the Buddha has his enlightenment in nature. He goes out, he leaves the palace and comfort and goes out into the jungle for 6 years. That's where he gets it. Jesus was rarely in a house. And the houses at that time of the poor were maybe just, one room, sleep on the floor in the dirt. He kept the rain off of you. But most of the time, if you see the movie Mary Magdalene, the modern one with Joaquin Phoenix and Rooney Mara, you see most of the time he's on the road. They're sleeping outside. He's under the elements. He's he's in the boat on the sea. He's out there. You see, and that he's very rarely uh, indoors. Something happens when you go outdoors. Um, Something happens and it's good. My brother Paul, friend of mine at the monastery, Paul Quenin, who's a great poet in his own right and a really great Trappist, he sleeps outdoors every night. He has a little overhang and he sleeps in this. In the winter, he sleeps in this, really good down bag, but he stays out all night so he can look at the stars. He's like we lived that way for 100,000 years. Where at most we threw up a few, you know, kind of like branches to may in case it rained, but then we were moving on because we were hunters and gatherers. We lived under the great sky. We lived with the mountains, we lived with the ocean, we lived under the great sky. And for a long time, we didn't talk. So we lived with a lot of silence. We've lost that. And so that's the idea of both being in nature, just going and sitting in nature, taking a walk, and also spending time there, but also to do this silent drop that we're doing inside. See, to the deepest silence inside. There's a relationship between silence and sanity here. You see, in 2001, the EPA did a survey, and they came to the conclusion that Americans. Now, this was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, Americans were spending only 7% of their time outside. I wonder what it is now with all the screens. 20 years ago, we didn't have all these screens. We didn't have social media. People will spend hours doom scrolling through media, or an hour or 2 hours on Facebook or something like that. Well, I wonder, I can't imagine it's even 7% now, you see. So that's a terrific spiritual practice to get into your life. The Green Man, it's that young part of everybody. In Latin, the word for the young part of the soul is puer. Sometimes they talk about puer aeternus, the eternal boy, and for a woman, it would be puella, that young girl. And she died. You got to keep that relationship with the young boy and young girl. And then also, especially as you grow older, then there's the senex, as they say, the old guy or the old girl. And, if you go one way or the other, I was sort of born an old guy. Some people are, work, 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 tradition, tradition, tradition. I read the great books, and all that stuff. But when the Green Man came in and just surprised me, that was something good for me. And so you all have your green man or woman. You all have also the gold part of us. That's the gold part. The gold part is that vein of wisdom that you gain by living. And then you want to have the two together. That's integration, you see. So anyway, let's take a drop with all this. And that's part of the things I like about what I call the dance practice, that invocation where we return like mountain, release like ocean, relax like sky. And then eventually the smile came up from inside. Yeah, I like that because we're working through nature. And eventually, if you can hit that sweet spot, which is beyond thought, beyond the thinking mind for just a little bit, I did sat 30 minutes with some of my people that I'm doing walking with. Uh, Especially yesterday, we did a 30-30, and it wasn't till uh, about halfway through that 30 minutes that the smile came up to my lips, where I actually got out of my head. See, when you leave the house, you get out of your head. No matter, I love this Zendo, but out there, outside the house, bigger Zendo, bigger Zendo, you see. So let's go into once you get there, it's as big as can be, of course, but it's a little tougher sometimes when you're inside. I don't have the ability to broadcast from outside. I wish I did, because that would be great. Maybe someday. All right. So let's shift over to meditative mode. We'll do the best we can indoors here. And we're going to really try to connect with that one of those four things, ourself, other, nature, and then the transcendent. So we're going for the big one here. We're going to just connect with the transcendent and dance with it somehow. Okay. So here we go.